Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here from Digital Leadership Associates. I'm also the author of the book Social Selling, Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. With me today, I've got Dylan Hay. Dylan works for an organization called Leadfeeder. Before we start talking about social selling for people or SaaS vendors, tell everybody where they can get hold of you, Dylan.
Hi, Tim. Yeah, thank you so much for introducing me and thanks for having me on the show. So best place to get hold of me personally is LinkedIn. So if you just search for Dylan Hay on LinkedIn, I should be the first person that you see.
You're the only one, aren't you, or something? Or...
Yeah, I believe so. I hope so. And yeah, if you want to find out about Leadfeeder, just leadfeeder.com.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is about how Leadfeeder, how you go about your marketing and your selling. So what we're talking about today is how SaaS or software as a service organizations can actually build up their own sales and marketing plan. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So one of the things that when you came up to me at a conference, it was Sales Hacker in London. And you said, can I come on Tim Talk? And I said, yeah, why not? And you started talking to me about how at Leadfeeder you do no cold reach outreach at all. You don't do any cold calling or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah. So I think one of the perceptions with any sales role is that you're an outbound cold caller or you're doing loads of cold email, but actually there's loads of ways that we're going to talk about today that you can use sort of inbound marketing and social selling to generate sales without ever having to pick up a cold call or anything like that.
Do you think that that, because the fact that you're not making any cold calling or anything like that, does that make you a lesser salesperson?
No, absolutely not. I know this is something that we've spoken about before. Anyone that thinks that, I challenge them, and I'd love to compare notes with them also. I think using social selling and using marketing to help you improve your sales actually, I would say, makes you a better salesperson, because the whole point of selling is to obviously sell your products, but you want to do that in the most efficient and effective way possible. And with using social selling and some other means and avenues that we'll talk about today, it makes that process a lot smoother and a lot easier, which in my mind makes me a better salesperson.
Because in a way, the way that you talk about it is that you mesh both sales and marketing. So there isn't this. I've worked in organizations where they've said, the salespeople have said, well, I'm not going to prospect for leads because that's marketing's job. And then they wonder why they get tapped on the shoulder and they get fired because they've not made their number.
Yeah.
And so what I often see is the fact that there is this merger between, we do need to do we do sales, but we do marketing as well.
Totally. And I mean, just to make it clear to everyone, I've come from that background of like heavy outbound sales. I worked in recruitment for a long time. I was calling hundreds of people a day. I used to work in the Hootsuite team where I sort of combined typical outbound outreach along with social selling. So it's not like I'm coming into this and just saying, right, you don't need to do any cold calling. You'd be stupid to do that, with no experience working within that space. I think my background has shown me that you can do that, but there's also ways that you can add to your sales process to make your process more efficient. And for me, that's been through the use of social selling. Okay,
so there's three things that you do in terms of and we're going to cover each of these three things. So one of the things that you do is work with influencers. Oh, wonder why we're here today. The second one is in terms of blogging, and you're going to talk about how you use content. Yeah. And sometimes I certainly talk to salespeople who seem to think that is some sort of lesser form of selling. And you're going to tell me that actually it really supports you in terms of you making your numbers. And the third thing is about the marketing automation and onboarding. Now, when I was at Oracle, I had one of those road to Damascus moments where one of the marketing people turned around to me and said, we call it marketing automation, but actually it's for sales. And I actually took a step back and actually investigated it. And actually marketing automation, it should be called sales automation or something like that, because it is actually for salespeople. You can spend more time on the golf course or doing whatever you want to do by embracing marketing automation. But we'll come to that as the third one. So the first thing, working with influencers. So probably why you're here. Tell me about how that impacts you and how you generate leads and opportunity through that.
Sure. Yeah. So influencer marketing is like a very big, I guess, buzzword or term at the moment that people are using. So I think it's really important that when you're within a B2B environment, especially, and when you're going to do any influencer marketing or work with any influencers, the first thing that's most important is to make sure the influencers that you're working with are going to be those people that are interesting to your target audience, right? So the first thing that I'll say, if you're going to do any influencer marketing, you can't just throw money at someone that has a big audience and expect it to work well, or you can't just try and work with someone that has a big audience and expect it to work well. You have to be targeted. So
just can I butt in a moment, Dylan? Because what I wanted to say is that even though it's called influencer marketing, what we do in sales is we try and get in front of people that we're not only do we need to influence our existing pipeline, because not everybody's thinking about us and we kind of need to wave it to them. The second thing that we need to do is get in front of people that we're not talking to already.
Correct.
And what we've done in the past is that we've rung them up and we've interrupted them. And what we're able to do is by using social and using people like, so you're going to get in front of my audience, and they probably don't know about Dylan and what they're doing is that when they're in social and they're sitting, waiting for a plane or something like that, and they're going through their Twitter feed, what they're doing is they go, well, I trust Tim. What Tim posts is really good. Always an interview with Dylan. Oh, that's interesting. I'll watch that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's dive into like a really practical example, and we'll use this exact call right now as an example, right? So Tim, you and I have been speaking for a while now. We've had some collaboration in the past. So the thing for me when looking for an influencer per se to work with is, first of all, you want to look for one of the most authoritative figures within your space and the people that add value to the same audience. So for example, your content adds a lot of value to the sales audience and you have a large following within that space, right? Our tool adds value to salespeople as well as marketing people, but I want to be getting in front of people within sales teams or people that are interested in social selling or just any kind of sales interest, right? So my first step is to identify the leaders within the space who I believe their audience would be the same audience as ours. So that's the very first step. But then you have to start to build up a relationship with these people. So I guess some people do this and it may occasionally work that you can just fire in a cold pitch and you might get a blog post or an interview, but it doesn't always work like that. So you have to build up relationships. So you and I have been talking for a while. I've been adding value to what you've been doing, sort of sharing your articles, commenting on them. We provide you value, whereas we will sort of mention you on our social channels or in articles that we're writing. So if I'm writing a blog and I know we're going to come onto blogs later, my value offering to you is I'll get a quote from you that we'll include on the blog, which will include a link back to your site, for example, right? So over the last few months or however long, we've been both adding value to each other to the point where it gets to a session where I can then make an ask. I've added enough value to you. I feel like I can make an ask, and that's why we've done this. So then today we're doing this Tim Talks, right? And this is now going to be seen by your audience, which may not know who I am. So
through my company, it's about 500,000 people.
Exactly.
So now, direct listening. If they share it, it's bigger than that.
Yeah. So now the thought is that we're not going to push the company that I work for here at all. We're going to add value to your audience and continue to do that. But the thought is that people will watch this or they will listen to this and they'll go away and they'll do some research into me. And some of them will then research my company and some will then turn out to be users. So it's like a long-term strategy, but that's a really good practical example to give is this conversation that we're having today is a solid way that you can work with influencers that's going to help your sales cycle, right? So stuff like this, if you're constantly doing activities like this, it's 100% it's going to add value to your pipeline. There's no question about
that. And can I say from my side, so the first and foremost is that neither of us are being paid to do this.
Right.
I had Sage approach me if Sage just they got their PR agency to basically contact me, completely blind. There wasn't any discussion beforehand, and remember, I don't earn a salary. I work for my company, so the only way that I earn a living and I put food on the table and pay for this house behind me is by I have to earn it in some way. And they bound up to me and they said, "Would you do some work?" And I said, "Yeah." So what's your budget? Because if people bind up to me and ask me, that will always be my first question.
Exactly.
And I think any influencer, apart from influencers who are doing a full-time job, that's the question that you'll get asked. Whereas what we're doing here, the fact that we're having this conversation, for me, it's value to my listeners, because I feel it's educational that we're having this conversation. You know, this isn't about your product. It's not about Dylan. It's about the way that you go about marketing. And I'm deliberately having this debate with you because I think it's educational.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important angle that everybody has to look on whenever they're producing any kind of content, doing anything on social media. You have to think with value first. So you have to think, how is this going to provide value to the person that reads this post? Otherwise, there's just no point posting it.
Yeah, I've had IT companies come to me and say they want to buy tweets. And I've just said no. My following me because hopefully they think I have some integrity, or maybe they don't even think about it. But my view is that there's integrity there, and my tweets aren't up for sale. Whereas Microsoft came to me, they had a particular webinar basically they wanted to promote. So I actually they paid for me to write a blog, and I wrote a blog, and that was distributed through my network using the relevant hashtags of ad and sponsored, so people knew that actually it was an ad. But the article in itself was value add, to use that term, or educational.
Yeah, sure. So to make it clear to people that are working in SaaS businesses or any sales organization as well, you can pay for influence marketing, but you can generate and work with influencers without spending a penny if you do it right, yeah. If you approach it correctly. Yeah. That's something we should highlight.
And it was interesting because in the same conversation that I'm having with Sage, where I'm saying, so how much are you going to pay me? Brandwatch came to me and said, we've got a report coming out. Would you give us a quote? If you do, we'll let you see the report 2 weeks in advance of us, so you could actually write us something. And so I wrote a blog. They got a quote for their report, which came out yesterday. And so, but we work with Brandwatch. It's a product that we work with. So we have a long-term relationship with them. So it's kind of you give me this and I'll give you that. And so, but just rounding up to me and saying, how much for an ebook? And say, well, it's this.
Yeah, of course.
So in terms of, so you see really influencing marketing as a way of getting your message across to a new audience.
Totally. So think of it as like, if you're a small sales team, for example, so Leadfeeder in the UK, it's just myself and my colleague Deepak that joined last week, actually. And if you're working with influencers or working with, let's say it's not influencers, but it's other people that are writing content with you or sharing content about you or any of this kind of marketing, it's like having another sales force for you, right? So I don't need to have loads of salespeople because I'll have influencers, I'll have marketing agencies, I'll have other blogs that are pushing content that we're providing or content that we're helping out with, which is then going to get us in front of more people. So it's just like having another sales team.
Yeah. Okay. The second thing that we talked about was blogging. So yeah. How do you see content and blogging being as something that can actually help you generate leads and meetings?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that's a real big focus of mine, and we could talk about this a lot. So at Leadfeeder, a lot of my core focus is on blogging and guest blogging, right? So for example, last week I had an article that went out on the Sales Hacker website. And when you do things like this, the reason that we do that and the reason that we focus on guest blogging is very similar to what I touched on earlier about when you're a SaaS company and you're a SaaS business, you want to drive as much traffic as possible, as much qualified traffic as possible to your website to then get them to either pay and download your product, to sign up for a free trial, right? That's my core focus, is to get more people that are qualified leads to our website. So it's kind of different from a typical and previous outbound sales roles that I've worked in, but very much a sales role in itself. And so one really solid way of doing that is through guest blogging. So similar to when you're working with influencers, you want to approach blogs that share the same audience as you, or even companies that share the same audience with you but don't compete with you on a product level. And you want to provide value for them and for their audience. And in return, you're often going to get a backlink to your website, right? So there's some really practical examples of how to do this. The first one that I'll share with you is an email marketing or a sales email automation tool. They're called Reply, and they share a very similar audience to us. So their audience is salespeople. Now, their tool and their product doesn't compete with ours whatsoever, but we share the same audience. So I approached them and asked if I could provide a piece of content for their blog, which most companies will always say yes, or most people will always say yes, because if someone's approaching you with good quality content that you don't have to spend time building out yourself, everyone's a winner, right? So I approached them. They actually wanted to interview me about social selling. So similar to this, but it was a written post. And then within, I think it was like a week of us agreeing that, it was live on their website and it was generating traffic to our website. Now, why this is so important is a lot of the traffic that it was generating to our website, we know is already qualified traffic because they're of a sales audience, and they're like, if they're looking at Reply's blog and Reply's website, they match what we want to see from a prospect. So it's really interesting to then look through our sort of Google Analytics and see the amount of traffic that's coming through to the website from that article, because with Google Analytics, you can obviously measure exactly who's coming and where they're coming from. And then we can see that relate into trial signups and purchases. So that's one really practical example for any like salesperson or anyone working within a SaaS organization watching this interview. I would recommend go away, make a list of, even if it's like 5 or 10 companies that are within your space that share the same audience as you, that you're not competing with. Go away, make the list, find out the people to connect with, and start reaching out to them. It's a really simple way to get your blogs, first of all, on good sites and on big sites, which will help you in the future land blogs on even better websites. But also it's a good way to build up more relationships within the industry. And I guess looking at this from a more kind of old school perspective, we know how important relationships are. And once you have relationships with people at those organizations, they're then going to start referring you to their customers or referring you to other people as well. So there's some really solid ways to look at it like that. So that's something that I wanted to talk about a lot.
So why are you doing this, and why is it, or why isn't, the question that I would always get is, why isn't marketing doing this?
Sure. So I guess like marketing can do this and marketing will do this, but.
And I know that your marketing does do this, but.
Yeah. So me from a personal perspective, right, my goal and what I target myself on is generating signups and ultimately purchases for our tool and our product. Now I've found at the moment the best way of doing that, the most effective way of doing that, is through guest blogging, working with influencers, these other strategies that we're going to talk about. Because look, I could download a list or go to a data provider and get a list of hundreds of companies or buyer personas that match what I'm after. But the time that it would take me to call through all of those, and the ratio of how many people would actually answer the phone, compared to me going away and writing a blog, spending an hour or a couple of hours on a good piece of content and putting it out on a website. First of all, it's going to get seen by so many more people. But also it's evergreen content. If it performs well and you get it to rank well on Google, people are always coming back to this. I mean, we've had posts that we've written for Sales Hacker like over a year ago that still generate traffic to our website to this very day. And we don't have to touch it once we've written the post and once we've done the initial sort of promotion. So that would be my sort of argument to anyone that says, right, shouldn't marketing be doing this? Yes, they should, and they are. But from a sales perspective, if you're a salesperson and you want to be a solid and well-performing salesperson, you have to do what works the best and what generates the best results. And for us personally, this is that.
So there's something about efficiency. When we prepped this and we talked, there was something, and I'm going to come back to talk about the efficiency of this in the moment of the sales process. But I think the first thing we have to remember is it has to be good quality content.
Yeah.
I mean, the article that you wrote on Sales Hacker is well worth a read, and I'm not just saying that. You know, it's one of those things where, for a start, Sales Hacker generally is a place that where it's kind of a destination. Yeah. It's one of those sites that you kind of need to dip in every now and again because there's always something that's quite good or good. And you know, there's articles that I would generally dismiss, but there's also stuff that's well worth having a read of. So you're in front of that audience. They're then now, if we think about the fact that people do go online and people are investigating about products and services to buy, and so if you're in a position where you're providing a really good article and they go, this Dylan Hay guy, what's he about? You can go to his LinkedIn profile. Leadfeeder. I'm just going to go and have a look at the website.
Yeah. And
that's really what you're trying to do, is actually to get people to have that curious intent to actually make that jump. And when they go and look at the website now, I might sign up for this.
Correct. And I think
and that's really the thing that you're driving for. And then again, and as a salesman, that's what we want, isn't it?
Exactly. And I read a statistic last week saying that buyers will read now between 6 and 8 pieces of content before they even open up a any kind of sales conversation or any conversation with a salesperson. So if you're not generating those pieces of content, you're already losing. You're already behind those organizations and those salespeople that are doing that. And like, as salespeople, we're all competitive, right? We want to win the sale. We want to close the deal. So if you're leaving yourself open and not doing these things, you're already losing to the people that are.
Yeah, we work with a company called Passel, which is a very quick way of creating blogs. And they have a statistic from one of their clients. It's not one of their statistics, which is that I think it's for every 8.5 blogs, this company gets a lead.
Yeah.
We've connected our Passel to social. So if you go to social-experts.net, our Passel page is connected to that, and as I spotted through Leadfeeder this morning, we're getting people coming and attracting people that are coming through that Passel page through our Leadfeeder.
Yeah. And the other really good thing about writing content, and whether that be guest blogging on your own website, you can use tools. You don't even have to use ours. You can just use your Google Analytics if you wish, and you can actually see like the kind of traffic that's coming to the website and where they're coming from. So if I've written a blog post about something really specific and I can see that someone has visited my website and they've been reading that blog, like sales conversations now, right? You have to lead with intelligence. It's all about leading with intelligence. If you get that opportunity to have a conversation, you can't just show up. You have to be prepared. You have to have something to go into that call with. Now, if you're writing blogs and you're measuring the traffic that's coming from those, straight away, that's your opening, right? There's something to talk about right there. And it can also help you with, from a SaaS perspective, it can help you determine where the person may be within their buying cycle based on what they've been reading. So it's super, super important.
Yeah, we put out an article about GDPR and it went ballistic. So I just sat down and wrote 3 more.
Yeah, exactly. And straight away, you know what those people are interested in. You can see who's going to need help and who you can be speaking with. Right?
So one of the things that you talked about was about using content to make you more time efficient.
Yeah.
So this is where you're using content as a way of, because as a salesperson, we've only got 200 days a year.
Yeah.
And we've got this raft of organizations that we're talking to. And generally what we want to do is cut the talk to the people at the top because they're the biggest deals. But you're using content as a way of actually segmenting that, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah. So like, I hear like salespeople that will say, I don't have time to be writing content. Like I hear that, I understand, but at the same time, I call you out on that. I've worked in companies before where, yeah, I've been heavily targeted on phone calls or on conversations, and I do get that. I totally understand, but you always have time to sit down and write a piece of content. It's not as big and as scary as everyone makes it sound. Like it's simple to write pieces of content, and if you can go back, let's say you're an SDR or you're a business development rep, and you've written a piece of content, if you can then go back to your management and say, look, I've written this piece of content, but actually it's generated this many leads or this return, or it's leveraged me a conversation with this person, no one's ever going to knock you down for that. Like if you can do that without having to call people, then great. No one's ever going to say that's bad or turn you away from doing that.
We, as salespeople, we're writing content all the time.
Yeah.
And, whether it's responses to RFPs or ITTs, or trying to get internal resource and we're writing emails, we're constantly, writing is part of the job.
Exactly.
And the thing I remember, I was training a person called Karen Clark, who's now at Anaplan, when she was a VP at Oracle, and I was helping her with a Twitter, and I wrote her an email about how to create Twitter lists. And as I was writing it, I went, "This is a blog."
Yeah.
And that email, I think it might have not been one of my first blogs, but it was the first thing that I wrote. And I realized that actually writing an internal email actually has turned into a blog. And I've done things in the past where I've been to accounts and I've sat down in front of a CFO and they've said, a media CFO, and they said, these are the 5 things that are driving finance in media. And I've gone away and written it up. Now, obviously, I've not mentioned the company or the person, and I've put it down as being my opinion.
Yeah.
But actually being able to create something from and we're in front of people, talking to people, and they're giving us this information, and we have a richness of content that is being presented to us, and we have that ability to take that, tap into that, and share it with people. And I'm going to use the word exploit, but in a way, we have so much content. I have so much content, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great idea, and I think again another really good practical tip to share with people. Like, just open up notes on your phone whenever you have a conversation with someone, or someone hits you with an objection on a sales call. If you're starting to hear typical objections, just make a few notes. You can turn that into content. Like, you know what the market is saying and what's working well and what isn't. Just note it down and turn it into content. It's super simple.
So you're using content as a way of taking smaller deals and actually turning those into signups.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, which allows you to then focus on the bigger companies.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to be spending loads and loads of time calling or working on these smaller companies that don't need as many touch points. That's what content's for. It's for these companies that are at the top of the funnel, or the smaller companies that you can push through to purchase without having to actually touch them too much manually. So yeah, that's the core focus, is to get those companies into the funnel through using content, whilst you can then, as a salesperson, focus your time on the larger accounts that you want to be targeting.
Perfect. The third thing that we did, so we've talked about influencer marketing, we've talked about blogging and content. The third thing is about marketing automation and onboarding. And so talk us through that.
Sure. Yeah. So I won't be able to go as in depth with this. So we have a team at Leadfeeder that looks after most of our marketing automation. But so from my experience, and what I will talk about here is, again, it's similar, that top of the funnel piece, right? If someone's coming onto your website, someone signs up for the tool, you can set up your marketing automation to deliver different messages to people based on certain criteria that they match. So if there's people that sign up for our tool and they match X criteria, so let's say they're a smaller account, or we know just from their Google Analytics stuff that we've looked at that they're not going to fit into one of our bigger price point brackets, or that they visited the site multiple times. There's loads of different examples, and you can then hit them with content without actually having to do anything. You just set it up at the first standpoint. So we'll share educational pieces with them. We'll share pieces to help them onboard onto the tool and get set up. Based on how active they've been on the tool, we'll then share other pieces of content with them. So it's almost like just constantly dripping through pieces of advice and help, which will then push these companies and these people further and further down the funnel, again, without having to actually touch them too much. So you just spend some time at the start creating the content and creating the targeting. But once you've done that, you don't have to worry. You can sort of let it run, and you can check the reports and see which content's performing well or which messages are performing well. And you can constantly be editing that on the fly as well. So like marketing automation, I'm not as hands-on involved with that, but it's something for us as an organization is super, super important. And I know a lot of SaaS businesses are already doing this really, really well. So maybe we don't need to dive into that too much, but I think, again, it's something that's really...
I mean, your product, like a lot of SaaS products, is pretty much self-serve. Because I think most, it's not like Amazon, but most people would expect to go to IT products nowadays and just use them as if they were like Amazon. And so, yeah, I mean, but you can book these 30-minute sessions with you guys, which are always very helpful.
Yeah, so we'll always push people, depending on which criteria they've matched and what they've reached and what they've reacted to. We'll always sort of guide people. I say guide rather than push. We'll guide people towards booking a free training session with a member of our team. So we offer like a 30-minute training session where someone can book on as long as they've matched certain criteria and responded to certain things. And the reason that we do that, yes, it's time consuming, and yes, it means someone like myself or one of my colleagues has to spend 30 minutes training a customer. Well, not even a customer, so there'll be the trial sign-ups, so the people that haven't actually purchased yet. But we found that since doing that, and since offering that service, offering that value, the conversion ratio has spiked massively. So if someone books onto a training call with us, 50% of those people will convert into a paid customer, which is like, it's well worth spending the time. And this is all because of the content, the different sort of messages we've been sending through to them. And the whole process is automated up until the point where they'll click on a time in the calendar that they want. I'll get an alert come through, and then I'll know when I'm doing the training. So you really don't have to touch it too much, because I know that's people's often the concern is, right, they're going to send for a time, then I'm going to have to play email tennis with them. Like, you don't have to do all this kind of stuff anymore. You just need to be smart about where you're spending your time. It's like we mentioned earlier about if you're a good salesperson, you need to be more efficient, and you want to be more efficient. And these are the ways that you can do that. It's really not too difficult.
Do you have any metrics at all about what you're doing, or?
So from like a social and a blogging standpoint, yeah. So I made some notes from when we were sort of prepping for this call last week. So at the time, I was looking through, and of the signups that we'd been generating, so these are the numbers from about halfway through last month, actually, right? So of all of the signups we generated, 175 of those were from paid marketing channels, so like Google AdWords and Facebook ads, all that kind of stuff. And 120 of those signups were what we would class as a qualified signup. Now, if we look at organic signups, so these are people coming from blogging, from visiting our website from organic sources, it was actually a much higher number, so it was 235. And this was like halfway through the month, I think, when I pulled these stats. And of those, 175 were qualified. So actually a much higher percentage of those signups were qualified, which is really interesting. And our conversion ratio was just under 30% last month. So about 28% of those then converted into paid customers. So like, yes, we do a lot of paid efforts, and AdWords is something that performs really well for us. But this is just to show you that actually the majority of our signups and then purchases are coming from organic efforts and organic traffic. And we don't have a big sales team. Like I said earlier, in the UK, it's just myself and one other colleague who joined last week.
Cool. Anything else, Dylan, that you wanted to talk about while we were here? Okay, cool. Because we've gone on to about 30 minutes, so sure. But I thought it was interesting, so I allowed the conversation to carry on. No so remind everybody where they can get hold of you.
Sure. Yep. So me personally, just check out my LinkedIn. Just search for Dylan Hay, and it's Hey. To find out about Leadfeeder, leadfeeder.com. And I do have my own personal website now as well, so that's just dylanhay.com. But I'm more than happy to, I love engaging with people. So if any of you have any questions or need any advice on anything, probably the best place is LinkedIn. Just send me a message and I'll respond to you straight away.
And you are very good at engaging, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I do recommend, if you've got any questions, do pass them on to Dylan. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the time.
Have a good day. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for your expertise today.
No problems. Thank you.
Thanks.